In this lesson, we will hide all items on the Flexi system that should not be used, and we'll also work on creating the Flexi Line's envelope objects. The first thing we'll do is go in and remove all of the cubes that we use to test our scale with. And now let's head over to Manage Layers so that we can create a hidden layer for all of these items that we don't want to interfere with, so that as we start to adjust the Flexi Line and connect that to our rig, we're not moving anything that should not be touched. So I'll go ahead and create a new layer, and we can name this Flexi_hidden. Great, and we'll make sure to make the default layer active so that nothing gets added to this Flexi hidden layer that should not be added. Alright, so let's go ahead and start by just grabbing our groups and the UpNode objects. We'll want to also grab our distance object. I'm just holding down Control and grabbing these objects, and we'll go ahead and make sure to add them to the Flexi hidden layer. From there, we'll go ahead and hide that layer just to keep track of what we've already taken care of. So we have our anchors to add to that as well. We'll just go through and add those objects. And we have the mid-bend group to add. Alright, great. Now for our BNDRV objects, these helpers, we're going to want to clone these, and we'll want to use the cloned objects as our envelope objects. So let's go ahead and select each. We'll press Ctrl V to clone them, and we'll go ahead and clone them as copies. We can head over to our listener window to resize these objects. So that's going to be $.size, and we could have it equal to 5. Alright, let's take a look. That's going to work out well. So we don't want to add these to our hidden layer at all. We want these to be visible because remember, we can use these as controls if we'd like. Now we'll need to go ahead and clean these objects up, but before we do, let's go ahead and rename them. Now when we start to rig our character, we'll use a prefix of bone so that we know that eventually we'll want to add them to our skin modifier. Now, as this relates to our Flexi rig, we'll actually work with bone instead of BNDRV. Alright, so after Flexi, we'll add bone, followed by A01, and we'll name the others the same way. So I'll go ahead and pause the video and take care of that. Alright, so they have all now been renamed. Let's go ahead and move over to our motion panel, and we'll need to clean up the look-at constraints tied to these objects. Remember, we want to be able to freely transform these. So let's go through and just delete each look-at constraint. Alright, just 2 more. Alright, so once that's been cleaned up, we also have to clean up the expressions tied to objects B, C, and D. So we can go to our scale tracks, and instead of a float expression, we'll need to work with the Bezier float. So we'll go ahead and choose OK. Now a lot of times, if we were to go ahead and right-click and open up the listener window, we actually have code we can use to get this done much faster. So let's take a look at that. I'll go ahead and highlight the code that was printed out. Just go ahead and choose copy, paste. So you can see this is for the X channel. So if we wanted to apply this to the Z channel, it's just a matter of putting in a Z instead of an X. And then when we go ahead and apply this code, we'll just go ahead and hit enter. You can see that the Z track has already been taken care of. So we can use this to save a bit of time. I'll go ahead and remove the printout. And I'll go ahead and copy this code. I'll hit enter at the first line so we can go ahead and move this to the second. And I'll go ahead and paste this, and we'll switch the Z to an X. help us save a little bit of time, we can go to Object C. Let's go ahead and take a look. Again, we have expressions here to clean up. So we can go ahead and run our code and notice both have been removed. Let's go ahead and take a look at Object D and apply it to that as well. So again, I'll go ahead and highlight the 2 lines of code and run our command. Now the reason why this works is because we're not calling a specific object. You can see here that we don't have an object specified. So that helps us to save a lot of time then. Alright, great. Well, once that's taken care of, we can close out of the script editor, and with Object D selected, Flexi D, what I'm going to go ahead and do is Alt right click and choose Transform to 0. You can see that the object is in its right spot. We can go ahead and test that with the others and see if we move Bone C, Alt right click and choose Transform to 0, Max already remembers that setting that we have set to make sure that the transformations have been frozen. Alright, so what that means is that we can actually go in and hide all of the BNDRV objects now. We always want to check and make sure our objects can be reset back to their original position. So just in case they're offset accidentally, we could always bring them back. Alright, so with all of those objects selected, I'll add them to the Flexi hidden layer. And again, notice how clean everything is. Everything's going to work just fine. We can go in and start to move our connect curves, just to kind of test things out. And of course, you can see that the objects here, they're not actually going to move just yet. We might notice that they translate, but they're not going to twist. And that makes sense, of course, because we need to make sure that they are linked to the BNDRV objects. So let's go ahead and do that. We'll just go in and grab our link tool. And after linking, it's a good idea to go in and freeze our transforms. So we just want to check for that. Again, we're linking to the BNDRV objects, not to the anchors. So there's the next one. There we go. We just have a few more here to link. Okay. So if we were to go ahead and hide the Flexi hidden layer with all of these bone objects selected, we'll Alt right click and choose Freeze Transform. Alright, so once those have been reset, we can now go ahead and start to move our controls and notice everything works properly. Beautiful. We'll go ahead and check our twist. That looks good. We'll check it on both ends just to be on the safe side. Beautiful. Alright. I'll go ahead and reset the connect curves. Just choose Transform to 0. We'll go to our bend control and test that as well. Great. Notice we're getting some beautiful results here that will look really nice after these objects have been skinned to. Great. We'll also check our global control, just making sure that that scales properly and that it can rotate. We'll want to go in and start to move our connect controls around after we've added some rotation just to make sure that the system holds. I'll go ahead and select the global node and choose Transform to 0. That should pop back. Beautiful. So everything is working just fine. So that means that we are essentially finished with our rig. Now the last thing I would like to do, just go in and create a top node that everything is nested underneath, so that instead of working with a few items, we're actually working with just one main group, and if we need to get to any other items in that group, we simply expand that group to get to those other objects. So it's just a way of keeping things even cleaner and more organized. So let's go ahead and stop the lesson here, and in the next lesson we will finish the Flexi line.